we go. So friends, welcome once again. Let me open us up with a word of prayer. First, let me see if I can close this waiting room so I don't have to keep hitting this button. No, can't do that. Oh well. All right, let us open tonight with a word of prayer. You join me in the spirit of prayer. Gracious and loving God, we thank you so much for what it means to be a connectional church, to be able to hear from each other, to share best practices as we continue to do your work together. We ask that you bless this time, bless these leaders who have come tonight to hear, to share, to listen, and then to bring best practices back to their churches as they are thoughtful and prayerful in their discernment about how they will have their own unique experience of reopening their sanctuary for in-person worship. We thank you for opportunities like this to gather together, and we ask that it be fruitful. And we pray this in your name. Amen. All right, a couple of disclaimers before we start this. I'm not a bishop. Jan's not a bishop. We can't tell you what to do. These are decisions that are best done by your sessions, your leadership to decide what's going to be best fitting and suited for your congregation, the very unique needs of where you are. Our only kind of advice from the Presbytery on this is to follow CDC, right? Do what the experts are saying and make sure you have that in one hand as you are planning your pieces, your next steps for how you are going to reopen for in-person worship and ministry opportunities. So what we're going to do is go quickly around our panel here. They're going to share who they are, what church they come from. A couple of them have some professional background that's helpful on this, and they're going to give you a quick snapshot of what is happening at their church for their plan. So we're going to start with Lauren. Where'd my notes here go? Make sure I say your last name right, Lauren. Lauren Bia from Westminster in Alexandria. Lauren, it is all yours.
Hi, thanks everybody for having me tonight and this whole group. It's great to be part of it. My name is Lauren Bia. I am an elder and chair of worship and music for Westminster Presbyterian Church in Alexandria. We're about 1,000-member church of various ages and political affiliations. We have reopened in the fall with a variety of COVID protocols with pre-registration and greater check-in for all attendees, lots of sanitizing stations, masking, et cetera, et cetera. And we, with the CDC announcement in May, have recently lifted a lot of those protocols. And this coming Sunday will be our first Sunday in a more full worship experience in the sanctuary for our worship. In my day job, I am communications and marketing person for Ford's Theater. So I've been working a lot with our Return and Renewal Committee, which is our church's reopening committee, on a lot of the messaging, some of the videos for reopening, website updates, and those sorts of things as well. But glad to be part of the panel tonight.
Thank you much, Lauren. And up next, we have Amy Jenkins.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Jenkins. I
mean,
am.
The boys, I would never do that for my boy. I'm like, just cut it off.
There we go. All right.
And I'm going to unmute myself. Okay, great. Good evening, everybody.
He has to stop.
I am Amy
Just
Jenkins.
like that too.
And I am a deacon. I was the moderator of the Board of Deacons.
But not until that.
Stepped back from that role a tiny bit. But I am on the Board of Deacons at Darnestown Presbyterian Church in Darnestown, Maryland. Are we still getting feedback, or is that just me?
Or it has to be loading again.
I mean, that's how we got it box graded, which was
John,
like
it's
$25. And here it's like,
Hey, sorry,
There we go. All right. Perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna try one more time.
Do it.
We're good. Okay.
Start over, Amy. Fresh slate.
All right, fantastic. Great. I'm Amy Jenkins. I am from Darnestown Presbyterian Church in Darnestown, Maryland. We're a smaller church, about 400 members. We are unique in that we went through a renovation project during the pandemic. So we actually have a brand new sanctuary that we're worshiping in. I am on the Board of Deacons and was the moderator of the Board of Deacons when the pandemic began. I do have a background in microbiology and biochemistry and have spent the last now 15 to 18 months working on drugs and therapeutics against COVID-19 as part of the government's Operation Warp Speed. So I have been thinking a lot about COVID, but I'm not a medical doctor, not kind of involved in public health, but have been thinking more on the how can we treat and prevent this disease. So our church last fall went into, we stopped in-person worship, but that wasn't, I won't say it wasn't difficult decision, but we didn't have a sanctuary. We were worshiping in one of the Montgomery County Public School cafeterias. So the decision was made for us because the school's closed. And so once we did have access to our sanctuary, we did begin worship with signups and a limited number of families allowed to attend. Of course, again, sanitizing and masking. With the announcement and the decreasing numbers in Montgomery County, which our pastor watches every day, we have opened up the number of families that we've allowed inside of our sanctuary. And just, I believe this last weekend was the first weekend that we didn't put a limit on it. So we didn't put a limit on the number of people that could attend. But again, we're in a new situation in that we are a fairly small church that has expanded our sanctuary quite significantly. So we have quite a bit of room. And so what we have done is currently we're right now keeping our mask mandate, asking the congregation to mask, and those in the chancel that are leading worship are not wearing their masks. And we are kind of setting aside regions of our sanctuary that are a little bit off from the rest of the sanctuary for those who have small children, myself included, and those who may be immunocompromised or for some reason can't be vaccinated, so that they feel a bit more comfortable. And we're currently keeping our congregation masked as it stands right now. So excited to be here tonight and happy to answer any questions in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy, for sharing. Up next, we have Claire. I need to ask to unmute. Hold on, everybody. There we go.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. A pleasure also to join this panel this evening. I'm Claire Gillam. I am a deacon at Georgetown Presbyterian Church in the District of Columbia. We're also a congregation of several hundred members, ranging, a lot of young families, but also congregants of all ages. And so we had really stopped in-person worship quite soon after the start of the pandemic, and in the fall had returned, like it sounds like several other congregations in the fall, to some limited in-person worship, a lot of pre-registration, attendance caps, social distancing while in the sanctuary, a very elaborate one-way flow diagram for how people got around the church. And for our congregation, we actually found that really the comfort with in-person attendance in the fall was really not there. And so we made the somewhat difficult decision to take a step back at that point and revert to exclusively virtual worship. And we stayed in that all virtual status until Easter. And at Easter resumed in-person outdoor worship. So Georgetown Presbyterian has an outdoor courtyard space that we began using for limited outdoor worship sessions. We've continued that. We started after kind of the success of Easter and seeing the caseload decrease and numbers of congregants being vaccinated increase. We've moved to first monthly and now bi-weekly in-person outdoor worship sessions. And the plan is that we will transition back to indoor worship while also maintaining the virtual option starting in July. Professionally, my background is in international public health. So have also spent just a great deal of the last year and a half working on COVID, but in settings very, very different from what we're dealing with here in the US. And so interesting dichotomy there. But again, not a medical doctor. So some expertise, but not in that realm.
We'll take it. Thank you much, Claire. All right. Up next, I'm going to mute you, is Jeanette Gordy. Jeanette, the floor is yours. You're going to have to hit unmute. There you go. Got it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be with you. I'm Jeanette Gordy from Grace Lanham Church in Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm a retired public school educator. My work with the public schools was in administration and supervision. And at Grace, we closed down following CDC guidelines. We have gradually opened, again, following those guidelines and following leadership in Prince George's County. We reopened in March with a limited number of people. We required our congregants to pre-register, and when we reached that number, we cut it off. We have sanitation statements and stations, and we cordoned off our pews and put tape down so that families would know how close they could sit with other people. We encouraged families to sit together, of course, and then we had spaces for people individually who were coming in. We are now open full with a full congregation, again, because Prince George's County said that we could do that. We are still masking every Sunday, and we're still reminding our congregants that we're practicing social distancing. So while we have no social activities as far as coffee hour and all that, we are enjoying a robust Sunday worship with our congregants. Thank you.
All right, and the last open to share is Reverend Casey Waite. Casey, it's all yours.
I'm Casey. I'm at John Calvin Presbyterian Church. I'm the pastor at John Calvin, and I'm thankful to be here. So from the beginning for us, I think being so insecure about, the science and our population, we have about 150 members. Our population is primarily in the older category, and so immunocompromised category from the beginning. And for us, the theological framework is really important, that that how we worship and when we come back to worship is a deeply theological and issue around hospitality. Who can be in worship fully with us. We worshiped out. We have an outdoor chapel. We're fortunate to have an outdoor chapel. So we did on occasion, fairly regularly when the weather was better, starting in the fall, outdoor vespers on Friday night, but kept the Sunday online, pre-recorded, so that everyone could have a shared experience. After Easter, we did a couple services in person outside, and then May 13th, we had our first official in-person Sunday. Now, our congregation is such that we don't have to do reservations because we can distance and all be there together, and that was fairly predictable. And I know every person in that congregation who is of age to receive a vaccination is fully vaccinated, who is coming to worship. So, and I will say this, we are still completely masked. We haven't, currently we don't have any intention of changing that. As long as there are going to be people in the population that are unable to receive the vaccine, especially children, it feels like a hospitality issue for us. We haven't talked about singing. There was a great panel yesterday, actually, from Practical Resources for Churches, and I can give you the link to look at that Zoom panel. It was recorded on whether churches should be singing. We have opted to sing one hymn at the end and have otherwise basically instrumental music, but we leave right after worship, so there's not a lot of time dealing with those aerosols. But they're two pieces of advice were one, baseline is we shouldn't be singing, but then the second piece of that was it's very contextual. And so that was helpful to hear as we discern a way forward. What we have tried to communicate to the congregation in leadership is, look how agile we have been. We can continue to be agile such that we can be hospitable in the way that God calls us to. So we're just constantly looking for that way forward.
Thank you, Casey. So before we go into Q&A from you all, we're gonna go through a couple of questions that we often get in our office about this, and we're gonna go back same way around. So Casey, you already jumped on one, which was the music. So if each of you could share your decisions on masks, on vaccines, and on music. How did you come to those? What's your plan to uphold those decisions around those? So each of you kind of go back or same we did. How are you handling mask wearing? How are you handling checking for vaccines or a decision around that? and then singing. So Casey, let's start back with you. You did the singing piece already, but jump into on your mask and vaccine decisions.
Oh, sorry, I was looking for that link. Masking decisions, we haven't really talked about it, and we have been cautious about the CDC's recommendations. We have always opted for whatever is the most stringent. That was very shocking for most of us when the CDC said, you don't have to be masked. But what this panel said yesterday was that basically that is a recommendation not for leaders of organizations. It's not an institutional recommendation. It is an individual recommendation. They were not making recommendations for institutions. And so I believe that, in coming session meetings, we will continue to be masked. Again, even though we're all basically vaccinated, we are not checking. We're small and in communications, so we have different issues than the larger churches. And I think
your ability to then check with vaccines is simply because your size, right? You're then able to kind of just know because of the size of your congregation. So there's nothing in plan for you all about how we actually monitor if someone is or isn't vaccinated.
But that's not even an issue right now for us anyway, because the baseline is we're masking and distancing. So it's not the only thing that we requested is all worship leaders and worship leaders unmasked while they are leading worship, while they're speaking. But all ushers have to be vaccinated so that we can make sure that we are protecting the people that are coming through the doors.
Great, thank you. All right, Jeanette, run us through your thoughts around what you all are doing for music, for masks, and for vaccines.
Well, we are singing, we've limited our hymns to 3. We're a congregation that loves to sing. We are singing with masks on. No choirs at this point. Masks are required once you hit the doors of the church. And if you forget your mask, then we have some there for you. We are no longer really social distancing because we're allowed to have, all the congregants come, though we are still live streaming. So basically that's it for us.
And you all haven't had a decision around checking for vaccines?
No, we've been a little skittish about that, not wanting to offend anyone. It's a matter of, we hope you're vaccinated. And as we talk to individual people, we ask, but we have not made a statement from the pulpit, so to speak. So we really don't know how many people have been vaccinated. We have about 300 members in our church, though we are open for full capacity. Not everyone is coming. They're still live streaming. So we are assuming that maybe they are not yet vaccinated, and that's why they're not there.
Wonderful, thank you. Jeanette and Claire, on to you. Same talking points.
So we, from the outset, had required masking for our outdoor services. Now we are not requiring people to be masked. We are still obviously saying, people can and should mask if they wish to do so. And certainly, as I noted, we have a lot of young families in the congregation, so obviously a lot of children who are not yet able to be vaccinated. I myself, I have a 2-year-old, so I am acutely aware of the considerations around there still being a large proportion of the population are not vaccinated. And so, we have been pleased to see that, even with outdoors, a lot of people are still kind of being cognizant of that and are masking. Certainly with resuming indoor services, we would intend to continue requiring people to wear masks at this stage. I think as Casey astutely noted, the kind of CDC guidelines, I think, were surprising and challenging in a lot of ways, I think, and certainly for an organization, a congregation, we would not at this stage be saying, indoors unmasked. It's just not something that is for us would be a practical or reasonable step to take at this stage. We have not yet resumed singing, which is certainly has been a challenge. And I think one of the things that that we all most acutely miss with the worship sessions. And we've been very fortunate to have wonderful instrumental, players and pre-recorded solo performances, but are not yet at the stage of congregational singing. And as far as vaccinations, that is a challenging one. We as yet have had no conversations about trying to track or record vaccination status. Personally, from an individual perspective, I think that would probably be challenging and would probably maybe raise, if we were trying to formalize that, I think that would be hard for our congregation. But obviously, the situation remains to continue changing. So I suppose there is potential for that in future. We'll see.
Great. Thank you, Claire. And Amy, on to you.
Great, thanks. So I should clarify that while we're a church of 400 members, on any given Sunday, we have anywhere between 100 and 150 people worshiping with us. And that was typically the case prior to the pandemic. Now I would say we have maybe 50 in the sanctuary and maybe close to 70 still joining us remotely. That number is starting to shift. So those numbers are starting to shift a bit more towards folks coming in person. We are still masking in the congregation, as I mentioned. All of our worship leaders and our choir are fully vaccinated, and they have all offered up that evidence, or they've all offered up the fact that they've been fully vaccinated. And so we made the decision to allow the choir to sing unmasked in the chancel only. And the congregation is singing masked in the sanctuary. As far as vaccines, again, like I said, on any given Sunday, there's about 50 people that are gathering, and everybody has very willingly offered up their vaccination status. So outside of those who are children, and those who cannot be vaccinated for health reasons, everybody is fully vaccinated. So I think that that's creating a level of ease within the congregation. So we have resumed outdoor coffee hours. So we have a lot of big doors in the front of our narthex that we can open. So we've kind of moved and shifted our coffee hour so everybody can stand outside and enjoy coffee hour after church. Right now, the conversations that we have been having are around really watching the numbers in Montgomery County. If you do the math, and so the numbers have ticked back up, so I suspect we're not getting rid of masks anytime soon. I think there's not a level of comfort with that. And I watch the numbers constantly, and also the statistics around the vaccines. And one thing that really concerned me with my daughter was that there wasn't a lot of evidence in the past couple weeks that I could find from the primary literature that said that those who are fully vaccinated cannot carry or be asymptomatic carriers of COVID-19. And so that to me was very concerning, because we could have a congregation of unmasked choir singers who have all good intentions and are fully vaccinated, but could be carrying COVID-19, and then we have unvaccinated members of the congregation. So I very much encouraged our congregation to remain masked. There is emerging evidence now, and we have seen some primary data that suggests that those that were vaccinated with the mRNA vaccines have a 65 to 85% efficacy against preventing asymptomatic disease. So that means they're not carrying anything. And so that is starting to lead, I think, to some more comfort with unmasking, although we're not there yet. So we're going to continue to watch those numbers. And I think from a numbers standpoint, when the numbers in Montgomery County drop down to less than 1 per 100,000, then the risk is very, very low. And that's when our congregation is going to, or our session is going to have a conversation about allowing the congregation to unmask if they so choose. Children and those who cannot be vaccinated will likely remain masked and in a slightly separate area of the sanctuary. I think I covered everything.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. The fact that you said your pastor checks numbers every 5 minutes, that's definitely true. Neil's always the one who knows where a vaccine site is and what the latest numbers are. So I'm glad to see that reflects also in leadership at Darnestown. So thank you much. All right, Lauren, floor is yours.
Yes. So with the changes from the CDC, our committee really shifted to decide to adopt the CDC language regarding masking. So their technical language is strongly encouraged for the unvaccinated, and that is what we will be moving forward with starting this coming Sunday. Of course, it is optional for people who are vaccinated, and that's truly based on personal choice. Echoing what the other panelists have shared tonight, our clergy, worship leaders, all the adult participants in our music ministries, and many others who have been our ushers and greeters Sunday to Sunday have all self-identified as fully vaccinated. So we felt that the comfort level within the church of those who were actually attending in person previously to this announcement was seeing increased numbers week to week. So that's something that we were taking into consideration for sure. We, this coming Sunday, are also returning to singing in worship for the first time. Since the fall, we've not been doing anything but a single musician on the chancel singing, also masked. As those folks will be fully vaccinated on the chancel, they're welcome to sing without masks, but the congregation, of course, would be a mixed group, and participation in liturgy had also been restricted previously. So really, it's a really more fulsome experience now with hymn singing and the congregation and the liturgy, speaking the Lord's Prayer and those other elements. For singing in general, for our summer music ensembles, we're following a more traditional summer schedule for our music. We've typically done instrumental or family quartets and duets. So that's really who will be leading worship. And then the idea is that as we move closer to the fall, we'll be returning to a fuller schedule with musicians. And vaccination rates, we decided to obviously look to those in our immediate communities as a helpful deciding factor. We know that I think about 50% of the population is fully vaccinated here in Alexandria and Arlington and Fairfax counties, and 60% is partially vaccinated. And we expect that really to be mirrored in our own congregation. So we imagine that those numbers may tick up over the coming weeks. But I think the other important thing we really wanted to stress is that we wanted to emphasize that it's understandable for folks who choose to continue to wear a mask, especially indoors, and to really be compassionate toward and respectful for our fellow congregants. Wearing a mask will not be considered something that's strange or unusual. There obviously are some of our adult congregants who may be immunocompromised, others on the wait and see to get a vaccination camp, and of course, all the young folks under the age of 12 who are not applicable for vaccines yet. So we really want to make sure we're moving at the speed of trust for people, not pushing the congregation to come back and be in the pews, but to continue to provide those virtual services to connect people through fellowship and worship in a way that really continues to build our community in different ways as we continue to move through this unusual time.
This is the work of the Spirit right now, guys, because Lauren, you already jumped onto our next pre-question before we go into some Q&A. So for you all on what Lauren just did, what is kind of the hybrid plan? And if you don't fully have it for your church, that's fine. If you're only more working on the open things, but what is that hybrid piece going to be for the people that your church has gathered because of Zoom or live stream or Facebook Live or whatever you have been using? How are you going to manage that? Are you going to be speaking to the camera still while you're also talking with the congregation? What's the plan to be able to maintain that connection for folks that don't feel comfortable, or we run out of seating and we can't have that many people here? What's the hybrid to keep you connected digitally plan for your congregation? We'll go right back around the way we went. So Lauren, you're up.
Great. So we have shifted to our summer schedule, which means that our education hour has concluded for the the church year during the summertime, but our Zoom fellowship hour is going to continue. We're still slowly rolling out the in-person fellowship hour, so we actually will not have that as an option for folks with traditional, goodies to snack on after worship. But there may obviously be some organic things that happen in person for those folks as well. We are continuing our daily devotionals. Obviously, our worship will be remaining virtual basically forevermore, is what our session determined. We've installed official filming equipment to make that possible. We are in the process of increasing the technology capabilities in several of our larger community rooms on the property so that we can have hybrid meetings once we get to the fall for folks who need to Zoom in for a variety of reasons. And just really trying to keep those things that have been really working in a virtual setting possible for folks, taking stock in what meetings and events should remain online, as those have increased people's accessibility to come to a certain event or hear a variety of different panelists, and just really taking a holistic approach at that through our digital ministries team to focus those efforts.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, Amy, your plans for the hybrid connection to the digital folks.
Yeah, so we, similar to what Lauren said, we have set up kind of permanent AV systems and intend to continue with a virtual service indefinitely. We actually have members of our church that have joined our church from places as far away as Texas and Brazil. And so we're very excited that, we have the opportunity now when people are traveling or not feeling well or for whatever reason that they can still join the service. So we are going to continue with the option for the virtual service. With that we have some really good AV folks that are there able to do that. We are holding our meetings either virtually or in person. So our last deacons meeting, I would say 75% of us were in person and several people were virtual. And so we have that set up in our conference room. And I think we'll continue that for our leadership meetings. And in our church, I think we have I know we have a real desire to be able to come in and use the new facilities that we renovated during the pandemic or that had started right before the pandemic. So there's a lot of interest in being able to get into this space and have kind of outdoor coffee hour and fellowship times. And so we do anticipate doing that over the summer in an outdoor setting. And obviously that would be in person and not virtual. So I think that probably covers the majority of what we're doing. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then while I get you on, Claire, a question popped up, which is actually gonna be helpful for this conversation. Your virtual, what platform are they gonna be on? So Lauren, you all said you're setting up a full live stream camera and all that. So that's gonna be on some type of live streaming platform service, I assume, right? You're probably unmuted, so yeah, thumbs up. Amy, what about yours?
Yeah, again, they're live streaming to YouTube. So we have our Darnstown Presbyterian YouTube channel. And so it live streams to that. And then we do a virtual children's time over Zoom. So we turn the live stream volume down. So we figured that out early on. You get a horrible echo. But some of the children that are in the sanctuary that feel comfortable coming up to the chancel come up. And then we Zoom in the kids that are at home.
Great, thank you. All right, so for when we get to Claire and Casey and Jeanette, put that in your piece too about what platform is that going to be on going forward?
Okay, I'm going to answer that part first before I get to the end and forget about it. So likewise, we have been doing a full live stream through the church's website and available it's linked to on Facebook and on YouTube. And so all of the services are then also stored on the church's YouTube channel for people to go back to and listen at different times if they're not available at the specific live stream time. We have also done children's music time ahead of the service. And so our director of children's music has been doing singing with children through Zoom. We've done a lot of, obviously, meetings, deacon session meetings are through Zoom also. I would say in terms of the hybrid model right now, still a lot of the activities kind of external to the worship service itself. So any of those kind of education hour, prayer meetings, session meetings are still being done virtually. And I think we're still kind of in conversations about how we begin to transition those, what they look like. Obviously, a lot of that being determinant on the people who are involved. And so thinking about how we make that possible, depending on whether we're talking about children versus, things like session meetings where we have a smaller group and it would be easier to transition back to that in person. Likewise to what Lauren and Amy's experience, we were immensely fortunate to have our director of music have a strong professional background in videography. And so he was able to pivot extremely quickly to really kind of spearhead a lot of fantastic virtual elements to the worship service. And really through his leadership and a lot of incredible volunteers from the congregation, we have been able to make the virtual live streaming of the worship service will just be a kind of ongoing element, regardless of how COVID pans out. That's just going to be part of our church's worship experience now. And so we will continue to have that. And fortunate also that our church building is structured in such a way that we were able to install cameras and things that they weren't too obtrusive and really don't stick out like a sore thumb. We've not kind of got a TV screen in the middle of the chancel. We've been very blessed to have the ability to do that in a way that preserves the experience for people who are worshiping in person, but still allows for that kind of quality virtual live stream also. So we're excited to see how that shifts engagement and how that really changes who is participating in our worship, looking to the future also.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. All right, on to Jeanette from Grace to share with us what you all are doing on that end.
Well, currently our Sunday worship, we are live streaming, and I'm guessing on Tuesday when we have session meeting, we'll decide if we're going to move forward with this procedure. We have put in some new equipment, not knowing how long we would be limited to attending church. So that decision has to be made. We are also currently having Bible study and session meetings via Zoom. And so right now we're kind of in limbo as to how we will move forward. We have been able to reach out to folk other than our congregants. So hopefully we'll continue to live stream and maybe get those folk into our sanctuary.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeanette. And Casey.
Okay, so we did pre-recorded worship throughout this, and I am the person that did the bulk of that. I think I'm in the smallest church on this panel. So shout out to all the small churches who are listening. And I'm going to own my envy of, I came from Lauren's church. That was my last church. I started the digital ministries team there, so you're welcome. And I miss y'all. Yeah, there's a different kind of challenge with a small church where, we have some tech in the sanctuary, but we don't have live streaming tech. And frankly, I'm not sure we have the persons to really run it, even if we installed it. So I think the whole time my vision that I think has become our vision is the content should meet the medium, and we need to do as well as we can with what we have. So I have in trying to decide how to transition back, knowing we weren't equipped to live stream, and I did not feel like it would come across at the same level that we have been doing it. I also knew that I could not do a full production, nor could my our music person to the level we were doing and do in person. What I do now is I pre-record the sermon as well as the scripture and a time of meditation right beforehand. So it is a hybrid of the digital worship in a sense. It's about 20 minutes long, so everyone can have a worship experience. They're hearing vaguely, basically the same sermon, and I'm still engaging with looking at the camera and making the content fit the medium in that way. But that's also out of necessity because we don't have all of the things to produce a live streaming experience. So that was the choice there. So and we're doing most things still via Zoom, but some smaller groups are meeting in person in homes, and now just starting back in the church building. And again, we know they're all vaccinated, so there's no official like the church is open for meetings at this point. But
wonderful. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, all of you, for answers on those. We're going to get ready to open it up to some Q&A. So if you have something you want to either direct to an individual here or to just throw out to hear responses from everybody, go ahead and start to begin to raise your hand. But while you're figuring out where a hand raise is, quick couple of plugs. First, if you're looking for a easy to do, pretty much plug and play opportunity for kind of the digital platform, way back ago when the pandemic first started, we had put together an easy to use package of equipment. Who knows if those things are still available online, but you can contact Reverend Tara Spooler-McCabe in our office and she'll direct you to that. There's also some grants for those churches that might be a financial pinch of mainly our smaller congregations to be able to put those things in. That's also directed to Tara. And while I'm speaking of Tara, she's going to share in the chat. She doesn't know this is happening yet. We have a whole calendar of we call them learning labs, but opportunities for everybody in the Presbytery to come hear from an outside organization, things like this, best practices online worship, how to avoid burnout. There's a whole calendar of opportunities for the rest of the year. We've already done the one on online worship, how to be the best online church. That's recorded. So you can go back and watch that one and pick up some of those pieces if you're still thinking about what is our hybrid worship going to look like. We had dozens of people there listening to outside organization talk about what that is. So those pieces about how to access those and sign up for the ones to come are going to go in the chat. And if you are still looking for, I think it's easy plug and play, but a very easy to use system that's not complicated, that has like 3 buttons in order to be able to high quality live stream something from your sanctuary that's not someone running around with a phone trying to hold it up on Zoom. We have that information that we've put together on some of the best equipment that's easy to use. All right, so let me open up my participants here. We're going to jump into Q&A. So if you have something that you would like to hear one of these folks on, Jan Moody, like I said, our state clerk is here also. So if it's a question that she might be able to answer, we can have her jump in. But now is your time to get to answer your question or hear more from our groups here. And if not, I'll just keep feeding them questions and we can get to hear more of what's happening.
There are questions coming up in the chat.
All right. Oh, in the chat. Okay, I got one here. Don White, I'm going to go ahead and ask to unmute you. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm Don White with Southminster Presbyterian Church. And I was wondering, are any of you doing sanitization after worship service?
I'm going to go ahead and unmute all of our people here so they can pop in if to answer that one.
Because the fomite situation, the touch situation has shifted, but our comfort level with it has not shifted as much. We do have a full cleaning sort of before the preschool comes in the building the next day, but we're not passing the plate right now. We're taking offering on the way out. I have ordered those long pole baskets, but they are on back order, not surprisingly. So we're not like, we had this whole list of like things we would do if we got back in the building based on previous CDC recommendations. And since they do not think it's easily passed on surface, we have sort of pulled back on the kind of immediate deep cleaning with no hymnals in there or anything.
Okay.
Any others of you all have a cleaning process that's going on after service?
I don't know what our cleaning process is. I got to be honest, but I think that we have our standard. We only have one worship service, so we have our kind of standard cleaning. We are not passing the offering plates, although I believe the plan is to start passing the plates this coming Sunday. Yes, June 6th, we're going to start passing the plates this week, because for that exact reason, that there's not, the evidence for the fact that you can transmit this on surfaces is decreasing. And we have, obviously hand sanitizer surfaces. We are not right now as deacons handing out bulletins. So we have bulletins spread out and people can just grab one, or they get emailed one so they can use their phone. And in the bulletin, we are actually adding all of the music and all the words for all the music, so that you don't have to pull up a hymnal or anything like that if you do not feel comfortable touching that.
Great. All right.
We have a screen in our sanctuary, and we're not passing out bulletins. We post the music and the other information that we need, scriptures, etc., on that screen. We do not pass the offering plates. And as far as I know, we are having our regular custodian to keep the building clean.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeanette. Who has
Yeah, similar to everyone else. I think, around the fall time, when we were developing the full set of protocols we would follow for being back in the church building, we had every minute detail of, everything. The pew cushions were being removed, the hymnals, no pens, no pencils, no bulletins. At this stage, I think, as we're looking to return to indoor worship, obviously, I think a lot of that will be revisited. I think some of the elements we will still be a little more conservative with, in terms of things like passing the plate and, maybe not returning to printed bulletins just yet, and just making those available kind of online. But I would imagine that some of the pieces that we were most concerned about kind of early on, we may relax on a little bit.
All right.
I totally thought I would have retired before we stopped doing printed bulletins. So kudos to COVID. Lauren, you have anyone to add on that one?
Yeah, I think we're doing very similar to what others are doing. We have a Dropbox for offering at both entrances to the sanctuary for those in person. Obviously, we're encouraging online giving as folks are able to do that. It's streamlined it actually quite a bit for our office staff as well. So that's something we're hoping to really continue to move through as we escape from COVID here in the next year. This is the first Sunday we will be doing printed bulletins, but of course, since we are continuing a virtual service, we also have a QR code in our sanctuary that folks can scan and pull up that on their mobile devices, easy peasy. We are not passing the offering plates, and we are not passing any sort of communion sacrament at this point. We're doing prepackaged elements for those sorts of things. So there's still not a lot of commonality of touch. We also this week have put hymnals, Bibles, pens and pencils, all those things back into the pews. So those things will be, back in the mix. But I think, as others have said, our cleaning protocols were increased during the height of the idea of COVID being a touch transmissible, and that has changed a little bit. So we didn't purchase a fogger, for instance, to wipe down all the pews or do anything of that nature. But we will continue to keep our cleaning protocols up.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, Chris Deacon, you are up next with a question.
Yeah, it's a question that's come up a couple times in Zoom or in the chat, but what are you doing about communion?
In-person communion. Good one, Chris. All right.
So we're doing prepackaged elements, the tiny chalices with the juice on the top and the tiny wafer on the bottom. We've decided to do that through the summertime, and then revisit as our worship committee this fall to see if there's been any changes. But at this time, we're sticking with the safer option. Traditionally in the summer, we would do intinction, and there was no way we were doing intinction this year. So that seemed like the safest option for everybody to feel included if they would like to partake of the sacrament.
We are using the same
cups?
Yeah, yes, the little wafer thing that's packed together with the juice.
Yeah, we have not done it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Casey, go ahead.
So we haven't done it and we haven't made a plan for that. But what I had been thinking was about doing it actually outside after like ending worship outside and together, and doing the having the sacrament there. We always do by intinction, so yeah, we got to rethink that whole thing. But to have more of a shared communal experience. But
All right, Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, we are just, we have not done any in-person communion. So we are just now resuming that. I believe we will do that this coming Sunday. And I believe the intention is to use the prepackaged materials as well.
Yep, we're prepackaged too. I wouldn't be surprised if those were on back order now, I'm sure. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know.
Hey, if anybody's out there looking for a new like business venture, compostable prepackaged communion stuff is going to be, I'm sure the Earth Care Network would love to front load that for you all to be able to go dive in for someone to come up with compostable, it's a hard word to say there, prepackaged communion. All right, next question is Keith Pickering. I'm going to go ahead and ask to unmute you. Oh, Kenneth, sorry. Kenneth Pickering.
Right. Hello. Yes, Ken Pickering from Colesville Presbyterian Church. Wondered if anybody has done any enhancement to the ventilation of the sanctuary for during services. Of course, you know, it's the aerosol in the air that counts. And wonder if you have open windows, open doors, fans, any other devices.
Good question. Thank you, Ken.
We
You
have
all
not.
changed your.
We've not changed anything now.
It did come up in conversation for us at an early stage. It was in terms of purchasing things that could, you know, the UV filtration systems or enhancements to the kind of air conditioning system. We did not move ahead with those at that stage. It was a capital investment that we did not feel strongly about investing in based on kind of where the evidence was at that point. We're also fortunate that our sanctuary is very kind of lofty and airy and kind of lends itself to some natural ventilation. So, you know, we are still thinking about things like, you know, keeping the doors open, you know, certainly while the weather is good. We are obviously in the midst of Cicadaville, so I don't know, that might also be an additional factor with doors open, but you know, at this point, nothing mechanical has been changed.
Yeah, I will say that we have not done anything specific. I think the difference for us was that, again, we renovated. And so we do have an entirely new air handling system. Everything's brand new. So I think at least my personal opinion is that in our congregation, it all feels brand new. And there's a new system and a better system than what we had before. But we certainly, you know, to my knowledge, have not gone above and beyond and added any additional ventilation in our sanctuary.
Same with us at Westminster. We did not upgrade the system, but we did have a door to the narthex open during worship, as well as some of the windows open for cross draft for exchange of air. Initially, I think that has stopped at this point, but it's something that we did early on.
Yeah, we did in the office get a lot of questions about are there funds to help with that, and it's echoing what you all said. It seems that has kind of died down as an immediate issue for churches to rethink about their ventilation systems. Thank you, Ken, that question. All right, Jerry Fields, I see your hand up. Go ahead. You might have to hit unmute. There you go.
So thanks, John. So I'm at Adelphi Presbyterian Church as their transitional pastor, and we have churches that use our facility. Are there any expectations from the other churches that would be similar to what our church would use? How are other churches handling that?
Good question. Anybody feel I'm going to unmute you, Casey. Yeah, I got you.
So we struggled with this because there is a Spanish-speaking congregation that worships in our sanctuary, and this is a huge source of support for them. We all shut down initially, but they have been back in person for quite a while now in the sanctuary, and our session decided that that they could make that decision for themselves, especially provided because we weren't in the sanctuary or using the building, but we did provide a very detailed list of cleaning procedures and policies and procedures that they'd need to abide by, and they've been wonderful. But and our preschool has been open since the fall, and mostly built outdoor classrooms. So they've been pretty incredible, but we could also just not afford to do any mechanical changes on our system. But yeah, that's what we've been doing with outside groups.
Is that true for all? Is that true for all of your outside groups as well as for the church that's using your facility?
We don't have many other outside groups, but by and large, when people have asked, and we have said no, we're not allowing for reserving our space. And when they have wanted, when the other congregation has wanted, members of that church have wanted to kind of host things, extra things, women's Bible study, whatever, we have mostly said no.
Thank you.
All right, others on their outside group handling?
We're still definitely at a stage of figuring that out. I think particularly with the types of groups that use GPC space outside of worship. And so we participate in a church collective effort that does homeless dinners and offers homeless shelter that would typically have been during the winter season. We obviously, that shifted. Our space just was not going to be a safe option for that over this winter. Fortunately, one of the other member churches was able to continue that, but that was obviously a challenge. And I think that's going to be something that we're still, in conversation of how we facilitate that safely, but still kind of hold up that mission effort that is, really core to what the church, kind of one of the core mission priorities for GPC. Additionally, we have a preschool that would typically operate out of one of our church spaces. They themselves have not resumed the childcare services they offer at this point, but I think that's obviously that will probably be transitioning, and that will also be a conversation that the church has to have. But we're not at the stage of having concrete plans for those types of activities and groups yet.
We decided at Westminster that until our clergy and staff are back in the building on a more regular basis, that we're not comfortable having outside groups just yet. So I believe the beginning of July is when staff and clergy will start having their rotational office schedule again. And then I believe session determined that we would not have outside groups with events and meetings and other activities until the beginning of the church year in September.
And I think Neil just put it in the chat, but we are resuming some of our outside groups are going to be gaining access to our campus beginning this week, and they are adopting the same protocols that we've largely put in place. And so we haven't had really any concerns with that, but we have asked our outside groups to do that.
So as you can imagine, some of our churches have a wide variety of who's considered an outside using group to come in. Some of them are actually lease relationships. Some of them are just a kind of in-kind donation. So a good place to start, because this is a question that Jan and I get a lot in the office, is to start with your insurance company for those who haven't done that yet, because they will be able to best navigate what's unique to your situation. If you haven't put your agent on your speed dial yet, do that. That's a good sounding board for thinking about how you can navigate through things like childcare, outside using groups, to be able to speak with your insurance about what the unique situation is is on yours, but thank you for that question. Was that Jerry? That was Jerry. All right, next up we have Catherine. You there?
You have
Okay, we hear you.
I'm done. Yay. Thanks. So kind of piggybacking on that, I'm wondering, and this is actually a question from my colleague Anne in the chat, about childcare, if you're offering it, and if so, are you requiring your childcare workers to be vaccinated? Because we've run into, and if you are, how did that go, and what legal resources did you use to make that decision?
So let's zoom, clear that in a little bit, Catherine. Childcare, do you mean like Sunday morning, Sunday school and nursery, and not like a Monday through Friday?
Right. Just during worship, you know,
All
the
right.
2 hours or whatever around worship. Exactly right. For younger children.
We have not yet begun childcare. That is another item that will come up for discussion at our session meeting. But I'm 100% sure that the persons who will provide childcare, should we resume, will be vaccinated and with proof of that vaccination.
Same.
Yeah, likewise, we have not resumed yet. GPC is blessed with a very significant baby boom. I think at last count, and we had 120 children, so under 18s, but a large majority of those being children under the age of 5, and so needing more of that, that nursery care. And making it challenging for us to, you know, we would often run multiple groups and classes on a Sunday morning. And so we have not returned to any childcare being offered yet. We had surveyed parents specifically just a few months ago about kind of as the adult population was becoming more vaccinated, kind of returning to parents and understanding their particular concerns, knowing that, you know, while they may be vaccinated, their children wouldn't be. We heard kind of a mixed response. I would say, you know, a lot of people who were still would not be comfortable coming to indoor services with their young children. I think, you know, obviously the last few months things have shifted, and as society, you know, feels like it's opening up a little more, I think people are having shifting comfort levels, but I think we are still expecting that, you know, there will be a good proportion of our families probably will not be comfortable returning to in-person. And we kind of understand and support that. Certainly, I think if we do, and I expect we will start talking about offering nursery care for those families who are coming back, I would imagine that we would ensure that the caregivers would be vaccinated for their own, you know, safety as well as the children's.
Amy or Lauren, you all have started to venture down that road yet?
Yeah, we haven't started offering childcare yet, and I don't believe the conversations are in the very early stages as to when what that will look like. But I think, as everybody else has mentioned, we have all intentions that the caregivers will be fully vaccinated.
Yeah, same with Westminster. Actually, childcare was part of the agreement that session passed for this summer, but with specific details to be provided later. So those details are still in process.
So I'm gonna commit your Presbyterian office staff to help. And if we start to hear churches who are beginning to have an actual childcare plan in place, we'll make sure that goes either posted up in the Thursday Mail or on Facebook or something like that, as we start to get word of churches who do begin to offer childcare and what their process and policy is going to be on that. So good question. I wish we had a little more clarity on what
especially the legal piece is hard, because we have like some are not wanting to get vaccinated that we already had. So then it's just, you know, how do you go forward?
Yep. All right. Thank you, Catherine. Good question. Next up, I see Mary Ellen. I'm going to lower your hand and ask to unmute you.
Sorry. got it.
There you go. We
Sorry, I
got you.
couldn't find the unmute. My picture moved. The question I had was, what protocols did you put in place for the people that are having outside groups come back into the church? We've had several requests and we haven't really covered what exactly we expect from them, or we're not sure what we should set up.
So we did cover a little bit about outside group pieces. Do any of you have a policy you've put in place about any of that? Or are you kind of playing them each as they're coming up?
Ours is about to shift, I think. So I'm not sure sharing it at this point would be all that helpful, because we're about to go back and say that the other worshiping congregation can not do all the deep cleaning things and stuff like that. But
so what protocols have you been asking the groups to work with?
Well, it's a long list that I don't think I can.
Well, that's a different one. I'm talking about these are during the week, and they're usually smaller groups. Some of them aren't so small. Just wondering, do you have anything like where they have to sanitize the area they're working in, or what can they do, or what can't they do, or did you cover any of that? Someone said they had their AA group meeting.
We have asked, we don't have this issue a ton right now, but we have asked that there be a couple of hours time between any meetings in any of our rooms. So for instance, the preschool teachers were meeting in our library, and we asked them to not do that any longer unless they had actually made a reservation with our administrator, so that if the book group that has started to meet in person was coming in, that they would know that they, what time they could be there.
So you said like a 2-hour space between.
Yeah.
Because we have our preschool is doing Camp Joy during the summer, and they have 9 sessions a week long, and they're there Monday through Friday, and they have been in session since June of last year.
And we also agreed basically with the preschool. The preschool basically took over our whole building, but we felt strongly, and they've done a good job of pulling it back as the school year winds down. But we felt strongly that this is a ministry to the community to be able to, and it's just they rent from us. It's not a church preschool, but we did agree that we would do our very best not to have any contractors or any people from the church in this preschool building when the preschool was visiting. When the preschool was in session, so that there wasn't overlap.
We've been pretty much doing that too. We haven't had anybody in the building at all unless they're masked, because we found out early that our whole ventilation system is one big shared system upstairs and down, and we cannot separate it. And so we've been very conservative as far as having anyone in the building. But I guess we could coordinate with them as to what would work for them too. Well, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mary Ellen. I want to make sure we get to move through some of these. So where did my list go? Next up, Eleanor, I see you. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Eleanor, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
I think my question may have been answered. Southminster has a fellowship hall room that likes to be rented. People like to rent it for various events like birthday parties, anniversaries, and so forth. And we've been saying no to that up till now. But I think what I hear people saying is that we should probably continue to say no for a while. People want to have their fall graduation parties or whatever, their spring graduation parties for their young people. Any advice there?
I think, Eleanor, this is Tara. One of the realities is it's that the church decides what your current protocol bar is going to be. And if you have the bandwidth of those users agreeing to the protocols of how to clean the space after the use, and if you want to put that on the renters. And it's also acknowledging that every 2 or 3 months, as people are gaining life, It's a fluid evaluation. So depending on, you can even cap it as a private entity. You get to cap the size that comes into that. And it's measuring the bandwidth of the congregation or your building of who's going to monitor or manage users following the protocols. Like that's what you have to engage with.
I also think that there are, I talked about hospitality. I think for the church and its ministry, it's like core kind of Sunday ministry, hospitality is a huge issue for Sunday morning. Like what I want to be as safe as possible for Sunday morning. When you're talking about other groups using the church, there are other issues of hospitality. Is this a place that the community needs for being together? If it's not a public thing that you're all invited to for worship, then your parameters around it may be different than the parameters that you have for when it's an open congregational event. Does that make sense? Like if something is happening in the ministry of John Calvin Presbyterian Church, I do not want anybody excluded. If it's an all church event, I want it to be as safe as possible. But if it's not an all church event, if it's a function of the Rotary Club or whatever, that's different for me. It doesn't violate the hospitality that we want to have in our safety protocols for worship. So you could have a separate set of protocols for that, in addition to what Tara said, with all those other things aligned. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but maybe I'm stretching understanding of hospitality. If this is the only space this community has to do certain things when family groups want to come in, I'm not necessarily advocating that we do it right away, but we're getting pressure and calls often now to use our space for their grandmother's 80th birthday party. And so they know that the protocols are that you clean it up and put it back in good shape as it was when you came in. They don't have access to the sanctuary. They only have access to the fellowship hall and a limited access to the kitchen, but they do have to use the bathrooms while the people are there. So that's what was behind my question. And I'm glad that Don White is on here because he's, in addition to being the clerk of session for Southminster, he's also on the administration committee, which is the one that monitors whether people are fulfilling their contractual responsibilities as they use our space.
Jan has put up a link to, I'm assuming this is what this is, Jan, to some best kind of legal practices. This is national stuff that has been put together. So a lot of these questions you might find some more traction in some of those. Thank you, Eleanor, for that one. We're going to try to get to the rest of a few more hands up. Carol Lee, I see you. Go ahead if you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. Basically a question around singing. I know some of you talked about what your choirs and congregation were doing, but basically, how do you handle singing?
Well, we did that, Carol, on real quick on different singing. Or quick show of hands of panelists. Is anyone having choirs sing? No, one. And then who is doing actual congregational singing? I know Jeanette, you all are at Grace.
Can you talk about corporate prayer, the Lord's Prayer together? Is that included with singing?
Yes.
You all do that.
But everybody's still
We do it,
masked.
but-
Yeah, you have to remember people were still masked in the sanctuary while they're singing the hymns and while they are doing corporate liturgy responses and corporate prayer.
And that's changing. That's changing at Westminster. People who are vaccinated no longer need to be masked in the sanctuary this weekend.
Okay.
And then what's the singing at Westminster in the sanctuary?
Yes, people will be singing in the sanctuary at Westminster.
Is the choir masked for the people who have choir singing?
At Darnestown, we're not. The choir is unmasked.
Okay.
Great, Carol, thank you. That question,
Okay.
that was a good one. We're gonna move on to Donna Perry. I'm gonna unmute you.
There. The question is, do any of you have any metrics that you're using to make any of these decisions? When you move from one phase to another phase, are there metrics? You know, during the COVID, we were using some of the county metrics in terms of how many cases per 100,000 or what the percentage of positive tests were to make some decisions about activities that we were doing in our congregation within the church and allowing to be live. And particularly as we go back in the building, outside it's pretty easy, but inside the building, are there certain numbers of people percent vaccinated? And how are you asking people and in your congregations if they're vaccinated or not? Or are you believing them when they say they are? And how are you dealing with visitors who are coming in the door? Do you require them to be masked if they're visiting? Yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things we're struggling with right now.
Well, at our church, everyone who comes into the building has to wear a mask. If for some reason they've forgotten their mask, we have masks provided, and we also have hand sanitizer provided. And as long as you're inside the building, you must wear a mask. Our choir is not singing, but the congregation is singing, and we are singing with masks on. No exceptions.
Yeah, Donnie, I think you might have missed that. That was one of our early questions. And from what I remember right now, it's just Lauren at Westminster who's changing their policy on requiring masks inside the sanctuary. Because I'm correct, right? The rest of you, you're still wearing a mask inside the sanctuary.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're still wearing masks inside the sanctuary at Darnestown Presbyterian, but we are closely monitoring the numbers in Montgomery County. I don't know that we've set a hard threshold right now, but we have had, at least amongst the MDs and the people that are kind of involved in this on a day-to-day basis, have some conversations. And we have begun to have the discussion around approaching the threshold of 1 per 100,000 cases in the county would be the point at which we would say that the congregation could unmask if they felt comfortable. But I don't believe we've put that into anything too formal at this point. And right now we are still requiring our congregation to be masked.
And just a reminder for all those participants, and if they came in maybe 20 or 30 minutes later, this session is being recorded. And so you will be able to have access to the previous topics that were dealt with earlier.
All right, I see 2 hands up. But first, I want to jump to someone, Colin Church. I believe you've been raising your hand physically, and I haven't been able to see it, but I got people alerting me. So I'm going to ask to unmute you, Colin. And if you have a question.
Yes, I do. We're having our annual picnic outside the church, and usually we provide the food for that. But in this case, for sanitary reasons, we're having those participants to bring their own food, drink, and utensils, as you might with a family picnic. The question, though, has come up with regard to those who join the picnic being asked to bring extra food. And the question is, have you all dealt with that? And do you have any thoughts concerning the safety of the food that might be brought in by somebody else?
My first one on that, Colin, would be like earlier when I said is I would call your insurance on that question and ask them that one first. If any of you all have dealt with picnic and potluck shared food, I don't think there's many folks jumping to that idea just yet. But any of you on the panel have come across that one yet?
So at Darnestown Presbyterian, we are planning a picnic for September. So this could all change, but we are planning in September to offer food. And like we have in the past, hamburgers, hot dogs, and then some potluck. I think that is our plan. We are also doing a coffee hour in the morning where we provide kind of prepackaged cookies or treats. We're going to do for Father's Day an ice cream social with popsicles and things that are all prepackaged, and kind of lay those out. So we are essentially providing food, but in many cases it's prepackaged. We are doing coffee from kind of our a regular coffee containers and stuff. So that is not prepackaged. And so we are doing that on Sundays outside right now. And we have started that as of about a week ago.
Prepackaged ice cream socials have been kind of popular in our presbytery. I've heard now about 5 or 8 churches doing that.
I also think if you just have one person doing the extra food, just in case you have visitors, that, you know, you're eliminating risks. So there's no scenario in which we are going to be completely safe, or we can predict, you know, every scenario. But like, can we lower the odds of passing along COVID? Yes, we can, by having one family do one person do the extra food, or just buying prepackaged extra food. So of course we want to be able to make sure that everyone can feel included, even if they forgot it was the picnic. But everyone bringing a little extra, it sounds like a recipe for disaster. 1 or 2 people making sure that there's some food to spare sounds like good hospitality to me.
Yeah, there were plenty of potluck suspect people pre-COVID, and I'm sure those numbers have only increased over the past year and a half. Good question. Thank you, Colin. All right, last hand up, Leesburg Presbyterian Church. I doubt that's actually who you are as an individual, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Leesburg, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for months I haven't been able to figure out how to remove the title from my Zoom.
We're getting some really bad audio on you. Oh, she might be lost.
Meetings, so I've always.
We weren't able to pick that one up. So if you can put that into the chat, maybe we'll get it answered, but your audio isn't coming in. All right.
Okay.
Let me look at our list here. Okay, we have our hands down. Wonderful. So we're getting close to 8:30 here. Oh, Greta Morris. Oh, I see. There you are, Greta. All right, Greta, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead. Oh, you're still muted. Someone's going to pop up on your screen to. There you go.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just have, well, actually, I've got 2 questions, but I'll start with the most important first. And that is, you know, in terms of music, of having the choir sing, do you have any, does anyone have any metrics on that? Like, for example, if 70% of the people in the community where you're located have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, are you considering it safe then for the choir to start singing? Or at this point, is it just still a big sort of a vague situation where, you know, it's just sort of everybody trying to figure this out as we go along?
I'm going to go ahead and throw that one to Amy. I'm sure that the metric hawks over at Darnestown have a very good answer for this one.
Well, I think we are in a unique situation at Darnestown because our choir is fairly small, and so they all have offered up the fact and in evidence that they're fully vaccinated, and so that's how we decided that we were comfortable having our choir back singing unmasked. I don't think that we've set an exact metric for when you know, we would feel comfortable again, you know, kind of mandating that, you know, everybody could take their mask off. I will say that Montgomery County, I believe that the fully vaccinated rate now is hovering around 60%, and the partially vaccinated higher than that. And we just anecdotally from talking to members of our congregation are a high uptake vaccine population. So I would not be surprised if over 80% of our congregation is fully vaccinated now, outside of course, the kids that, of the people that can be vaccinated, let's put it that way. So I think that that's what led us to feel comfortable about having our choir unmasked and singing.
John, we have the question back from a Leesburg person. She put it in the chat. It was one that had been answered previously, but has anybody done children's programming before? And so can the panelists who talked about their vacation Bible school coming, was that right? No, nobody from the panelists said that.
No.
Yep. Right. Most of them said no to the children's programming.
And I just put in the chat again that there was an hour-long panel on congregational singing. It was not on choir singing, it was on congregational singing, and it was very helpful. And there's also a list of resources. So those are linked in the panel, and maybe Tara and John can get those links up on the Presbytery website. But I think the Hymn Society, their general wisdom is there's not metrics. There's not a point, again, there's not a point at which we can say things are safe. So because we can still get the flu and die. So there's going to be there's going to be a point at which your congregation needs to discern, like, is it the time to switch over? But the national societies are saying no. However, our individual institutions are in varying places on it. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Greta and Casey. We will try to grab some of these helpful links that have been shared and get those up on our website for pieces. All right, I see someone from the wonderful Parker Jones family has their hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you all over there. And you can bring it home with our final question for tonight.
Thank you. I have a question on a temperature check. Has anyone or is anyone doing a temperature check, and are you doing the contact tracing, any format for contact tracing, just in case someone does have a positive test? And then my other comment was someone mentioned not being able to ask people if they've had the vaccine. What I have done is ask people, which vaccine did you get? And when they say none, it's like, okay.
That's I hope everyone writes that down. That's a good way of asking that question. All right, so temperature check, contract tracing, would love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
It's just the pastoral care question, Pastor. That's what I think is the smartest thing to do.
Thank you,
Tara. You have to know like how you're going to act on that then too. Like, what are you using that information for? I didn't want to put my ushers in a position where they, they're the gatekeepers. So I will say, I also right in the beginning, right after, like we were opening up the Sunday that the CDC came out with their new guidelines, and I made a graphic that said all people in worship need to be masked. Only worship leaders will be unmasked. If you come to worship without a mask, we'll give you a mask or ask you to preach. And that was sort of my gentle but humorous way of saying, like, we are going to stick to this. And I know it stinks for some of you, but.
I will say, related to the temperature checks question, we are doing temperature checks, or we were doing temperature checks at Darnestown Presbyterian. We have decided to stop doing that as of this Sunday, but we do have a sign-in sheet. So we are asking everybody to sign in so we know who was in attendance that week. And we would do that anyway, and we traditionally have had sign-ins, but now it's like, as you walk in the door, you can't miss it. Sign this sheet before you leave the narthex.
Yeah, we have not done temperature checks. I think it may be something, if we do look at resuming children's programming, then that may be an element that would be included. I mean, like a lot of parents know, if you're dropping a child off at school or daycare right now, they're getting a daily temperature check. I could potentially see that as something we would have a conversation around. But no, we did not institute temperature checks, and I wouldn't anticipate starting them now for the larger congregation. And likewise, we were keeping track of, as we've resumed in person, we are keeping track of who's attending and making sure we have a contact number for that person in the case of a case being reported to the church.
Prior to this coming Sunday, we have had a reserved seating done in advance where people specifically picked which pew, and then the technology system that we had purchased actually physically distanced the 6 feet from that pew to what else was available within the sanctuary. Part of that process of reserving your space was clicking through the acknowledgement of risk for attending a service in person. Session voted on our team to remove that as we begin to reopen worship. So we will no longer be maintaining that contact tracing information. To my knowledge, we've not had any instance of COVID at Westminster since reopening in October.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for our panelists for agreeing to share the insights, what's happening inside their churches and their ministries. Like we said, this is being recorded. We will get this up somehow for those of you all to check in on it. The links that were shared today, we will get those up on our website under our COVID section on the long list of helpful things for churches in terms of rethinking their opening. I also strongly encourage you all to recheck with the Learning Lab opportunities, especially the pre-recorded one on best practices for digital church, and then to sign up for the ones coming up for the rest of the year. So as we think about what church might look like right now and in the years to come after all of this is over. So once again, thank you all. I will close us in prayer, and then we can be on with our Thursday evening. So let us close in prayer. Loving and merciful God, we thank you for the gift to be your church, to continue to push forward even in these very unique and uncertain times, that we are trusting you and we are trusting each other, that we're listening to what you are offering us, listening to the experts around us, listening to professionals as we do our best to shine your light, your love, your truth, your gospel out to our congregations and into our communities. We pray over each of our churches in this presbytery tonight that they might be thoughtful and prayerful in their discernment about their next steps. And most importantly, that they are listening to you, what you are asking them to do in next steps for their Sunday morning gatherings. We thank you again for the leaders here tonight, the panelists, those from our churches who have showed up to hear, to listen, to talk, and to be engaged with each other and with you. We thank you so much. We pray this in your name. Amen. Good night, everyone. We'll see you at something coming up in National Capital Presbytery. Stay tuned on website, social media, to see how you can be engaged in more things like this to share with each other. So thank you again, and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.